Some leaders shape industries, some shape institutions, and some shape people long before they realize it. Today's guest is Professor Tariq Khan, a clinical associate professor of leadership and marketing at New York University, where he's been teaching since 2006, a visiting faculty member at IBA and LUMS, a published author, global keynote speaker, board leader, and strategist whose work spans across corporate leadership, academia, and global nonprofit impact. Before the classroom, Professor Khan built a distinguished corporate career holding senior leadership roles at ING Nationwide and MetLife, including serving as Senior Vice President and Head of Market Development at ING. In 2010, he founded Global Diversity Marketing, advising Fortune companies and C suite leaders on strategy, culture, and leadership in changing times. He currently serves on multiple boards, including Ascent, APAICS, and Open Global, where he is president, extending his leadership beyond business into community, education, and representation. In 2022, he published Leadership in Changing Times, a book now used across universities and organizations worldwide. What makes today's conversation especially meaningful to me is that I still remember the first day I walked into Professor Khan's class in my very first semester and then in my final semester. Those sessions remain some of the most memorable part of my journey at NYU. So today, it feels like a full circle moment, moving from learning leadership frameworks in the classroom to questioning leadership in practice side by side. This episode today isn't about accolades, it's about judgment, responsibility, and what leadership asks of you across decades, roles, and turning points. This is Unapologetic Me, and today I'm in conversation with Professor Tariq Khan. Professor Khan, I am just so excited that I finally got the time on your calendar, and I can't wait to record this episode with you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ekta, for having me. It's truly a pleasure, especially when one of your students is interviewing you. It's so gratifying to see. I'm always happy with your progress. And you are one student who always stood out for the right reason with your energy, with enthusiasm that you bring. So I'm really happy that you have started a podcast, and today we are together here.
Thank you. So, we're going to start, and here goes the first question. You've led in corporate boardrooms, academic classrooms, and nonprofit institutions. When you look across this entire arc, how has the definition of leadership evolved over time?
So I think depends on the life stages, right? So I divide life into three stages: age 0 to 25, 25 to 50, and 50 and above. 0 to 25, not in a negative way, but a very selfish mode. It's all about me. How do I look? What am I, where am I going to school? How many friends do I have? How many followers do I have? How many likes do I get? And all these things. And it's perfectly fine. There is nothing wrong about that. And when you pass that, stage and you go from 20 to 50, then you start developing yourself. How my job is growing, how am I contributing, how am I responsible for other people. You extend your family, you look at both, your parents and your next generation, and you're in a very developmental mode. And then you cross 50. That's a stage when you start reflecting on your life. And then you ask a question and says, why am I in this world for? What have I done? What have I given back? So leadership phases changes in all three stages. In the first stage, there are leaders who are under 25, and especially if you look at the tech world, many of them appropriately became entrepreneurs and leaders. So obviously they were still in self. So in the early stages of your life, it's more about, how am I performing as a leader? What have I achieved? How big my company has grown? How much profit have I given? What is the growth of my company? But when you get to the second stage, which is the later stage of life, it becomes more meaningful that what have you done in this world? What is your contribution? It doesn't matter how much is your bottom line or, how many billions you're worth, but from, giving back perspective, what you have given back. And it changes from the business leader to the political leader to a social leader. So leadership has a different perspective depending on whose eyes are you looking from and whose lens are you using.
Thank you. And you've explained so in such a detail. I feel like I was sitting in the classroom, how we would have those discussions, and you would take us through the chart and everything. So thank you for this detailed answer. Tell us, you spent 20 years in senior roles at Fortune companies like ING, Nationwide, and MetLife. What did large scale corporate leadership teach you that no textbook ever could?
First of all, I'm very thankful for all the training and the experience that I have received from these Fortune companies. And I always recommend people, even those who want to become an entrepreneur right out of college or at early age, that unless you have an amazing idea that cannot wait, I recommend people to spend some time working for large companies because the kind of training and discipline that you get from there cannot be replaced by anything else. So I'm very, very fortunate that I spent first 18, 20 years working for these Fortune companies. They taught me how to handle problems, how to come out with solutions, but they also taught me the discipline, how to manage up and manage down. As soon as you enter in a company, you're always trying to please people, and you're only as good as the person that you're reporting to. But then you learn the corporate politics, which is very hard to learn in classrooms
Yeah.
or universities. But that's the reality in life, right? Because once you enter a company, there are 15 other people who are doing similar jobs like you within your department. But there is only always one CEO of a company. And the higher you go in the organization, the more political battle it becomes. So the corporate teaches you not only a discipline, delivery, presentations, how to communicate, how to understand, and they invest a lot of money in you. But more importantly, you learn how to manage up and manage down, which is very important in life. How do you really make sure that you deliver what has been given to you? How do you make sure that every department, every organization that you pick up, you leave it better than you found? So it is an incredible training, and I'm very thankful that I was a part of it.
Great. All right, moving on. As Senior Vice President and Head of Market Development at ING, you were operating at the intersection of growth, risk, and strategy. What were the hardest leadership decisions you had to make when the stakes were the highest?
I think ING was my last corporate job, and it was it was a job that everything that I wanted to be in a professional life, I felt that I got it right. To work for a company of that size, I believe at that time they were the eighth largest company in the world, bigger than many other companies. So being eighth largest company and having a senior president position at that age was very gratifying and thankful for that. But more importantly, it was a European company. I have never worked outside US, so I work for US companies, but every company has a culture. The European culture is very different. I'm not saying bad or good, but it's a very different culture. So I had to adapt myself into that culture. And this is the time when we were just about to hit recession. And ING being such a huge financial services company, they were very good to me. I was very good to them. But what I learned that the big companies have big problems. Big companies face big challenges, and we found ourselves in the midst of one of the biggest financial recession in my career life. So it was very interesting, but it was a great learning experience. How do you make important decisions? It is not easy to let people go, and especially people who are good, and to communicate that. But that's a part. When you're a senior leader in an organization, you always hire people and you always let people go. So how these companies downsize, sometimes they call it right size. That's a challenge because, but that's the reality of life. So that's the nature of the beast, as we say in business
Yeah.
when you run. So when you work for large companies, we realize that a lot of time, and I'm not talking about this particular company, but I'm talking in general. Large companies make a strong commitment that everyone, this is one big family of the company, whoever you work for. But it's not. It's very selfish because families don't hire family members,
Yeah.
and companies have to right size and they have to let people go, and it's a very difficult decision for the person who's letting people go, not realizing that soon enough that person might have to go as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a culture of work, right? That's a culture at the corporates. Now that we've spoken about the corporates, let me bring you to the entrepreneurship side. In 2010, you founded Global Diversity Marketing. Interesting thing that I want to learn from you is what gap did you see in how organizations were approaching leadership, culture, and inclusion that made you say that this needs to exist?
I think my expectations were mismanaged when I wanted to become an entrepreneur. Usually people become an entrepreneur at early age. I had already had spent 18 to 20 years in corporate life. But I think I was unhappy.
Okay.
I had everything that I wanted in a corporate life, but I had no reason. And I think there was something missing in life. So I decided that I want to be an entrepreneur, knowing very little about entrepreneurship. One of the biggest misconception that I had that every entrepreneur is a leader, and they're not, right? Entrepreneur means that you're starting a business, you have an idea. Sometimes it could be innovative. Mine was not innovative at all. I just started a management consulting firm. And I would fast forward this, I think it was about 7 or 8 years later. I was speaking at a conference at Harvard University, and one young student stood up and asked me a question that you have worked for corporate and you have been an entrepreneur. What is the difference? I
Hmm.
said, when you work for a company, your salary is guaranteed, but your job is not guaranteed. When you're an entrepreneur, your job is guaranteed, but your salary is not guaranteed. So, entrepreneur is a different kind of mindset. And
Hmm.
I'm very thankful for becoming an entrepreneur. The 15 years I spent as an entrepreneur have been best years of my life. But there is always a trade-off. Every single day when you wake up, whether you're driving, you're taking shower, you're going to sleep, you're constantly thinking about your business. But when you work for an organization, sometimes it ends. Even at senior level position, there are resources available that'll take the responsibility. But when you're an entrepreneur, even if there is one person working in your company or 1,000, you're responsible for them. So it comes with a different set of responsibility, and the challenges are very different. From a leadership perspective, I think there are different types of leadership. When you are working for corporation, you have an army of support
Hmm.
members, and when you're an entrepreneur, you are the CEO of the company and you're the janitor of the company as well.
All right, perfect. Dennis, you've coached and advised senior leaders across industries. What do leaders at the top still underestimate, even with experience, authority, and data on their side?
I think, when I was writing the book Leadership in Changing Times, I've read so many books on leadership, and, great learning came from them. Today's leadership is very different. One of the most important thing that leaders need to understand is the adaptability and flexibility that's needed.
Hmm.
Uh, 30 years ago, you could have applied the principle that was done 50 years ago. Uh, but the changes that we are going to see in next 10 years probably will far exceed the changes that we have seen in 100 years. So today's leaders have to be very agile, and they have to be very energetic in terms of keeping an eye on the market.
Hmm.
How a lot of students that we are preparing and what we are teaching them may not be relevant 10 years from now.
Hmm.
So I think leadership has is going through a major transition, and transformation, I should say. And we just have to see that we are seeing a lot of young leaders, right? We are seeing a lot of women leaders, which is very encouraging and positive sign. There was a time in Fortune companies we used to say that there are more CEOs named John than women CEOs, and that had to change, and thankfully changed, but we are still far behind that. So
Yeah,
when I teach my classes and I see 95% of them are women, at the graduate level, that gives me a hope that obviously they're getting more education, and they'll be in more senior roles. So I think bringing more women into leadership probably will make this world a better place as well.
great. All right, Professor Khan, we're going to move into the non-profit side now. Your non-profit work spans education, advocacy, and professional development. What responsibility do business leaders have beyond shareholder value, and where do many fall short?
Well, honestly speaking, I entered the nonprofit world for a very selfish reason.
Let's go.
This was 20 some years ago. I was very busy in my corporate life, and one of my friend, who's like a very close friend, came to me and said, "Tariq, you have a very impressive background. The only thing missing from your resume or CV is a nonprofit."
Hmm.
I said, why should I be involved in nonprofit? Because the word at that, for me at that time, the only entity that I cared about was my bank account because I was in that phase of life where it was more important. And the
Okay.
person explained it to me that, nonprofit is good, you give back. And I was least interested in giving back, but I was interested in
Hmm.
putting a nonprofit board. I joined a very amazing organization, nonprofit board, and as a founding board member, we sat down, and then we started, with children's education. And after a few years, there was an incident that really changed my perspective about nonprofit. So when I entered the nonprofit, I used to do galas every year and just promote everything. And I was very happy that I have a great nonprofit organization board on my resume, and I get a lot of promotion, a lot of exposure. And it was one of the galas that I was doing, and we had about 1,000 plus people sitting in the audience, and I was going to get ready to speak after dinner time. And young girl came to me and said, "Mr. Khan." I said, "Yes." She said, "I want to thank you for everything." And when you are at an event, you meet a lot of students and a lot of young people who thank. And I said, "Oh, you're welcome," and didn't pay attention. And then she looked at me and she said, "I want to thank you for changing my life." And I
Okay,
looked
this
at
is
her.
remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at her and I wanted to make sure, do I know her? And she said, "You really changed my life." I said, "My children don't say that, but that's great." And she said, "Can I give you a hug?" I
Oh
said,
my
"Sure."
God.
And she hugged me, but the hug was very personal. And then
Okay.
I kind of, I wanted to look at her. I thought maybe she's somebody that I know, maybe a daughter of someone that I know. And I said, "Do I know you?" She said, "Maybe not, but I know you very well." I said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, I'm from California. My parents migrated. They were in farming business. And from the young age, I was told that I will be getting married at a very young age, because that's, how things work out in our community. It most probably could be an arranged marriage, and I wouldn't be going to a college." And this really bothered me. But when I was in high school, especially my junior, senior year, I started looking for colleges. And we were not a very family with a lot of means. So I told my mother, because I couldn't communicate that to my father. He was very strict. He loved me very much, but he was a strict father. And I told my mother that I want to go to a great university, and she said, "We don't have money, and we can't do that, so and don't focus on that." And she
Hmm.
said, I was really, really disappointed. So out of desperation, I started looking around, and I found your scholarship. So this was the nonprofit board I was serving. And she said, a glimmer of hope came, and I thought maybe this can help me. This is many years back. So at that time, we used to get paper application. So she said, out of happiness, I applied, and I sent my application. And about 2 weeks later, I followed up, and they told me that we did receive your application, but it came 3 days late, so we cannot accept it. She said, I cried that night, all night, and all my dreams were shattered because this was only hope that I had. And then, out of desperation, I searched your website and I looked at the board of directors, and you were the only one who looked like my family, because she came from India.
Okay.
And I said, "What happened?" She said, "I got your phone number from the office and I called." I didn't recall that call. And I said, "What did I say?" She said it was a very short call. You took my name and my number and information and said, "Okay, let me see what I can do." And you hung up. I said, "Okay, that's typical me." And what happened after that? She said, after that, a week later, I received a call from the scholarship office, and they said one of our board of directors have recommended, and we are going to review your application. And I just want you to know that I graduated from Harvard, and now I'm going to Columbia, and
No
everything has
way.
been and
Oh my
everything has
God.
been paid for. Now, sometime unintentionally, you can do
Yeah.
things which has no clue. And it really brought happy tears to my eyes. And I said, "Really? And what about the parents?" And she said, "They're sitting in the audience. They're the happiest and proudest parents." I said, "You're coming up with me and sharing your story. You don't have to necessarily, highlight our relationship or whatever happened, but you are really a poster child of why we do and what we do." From that time, my perspective of nonprofit changed, and I started focusing more on giving back than getting.
Wow. This is such a powerful story, Professor Khan. I remember you sharing this with us in the class also. And I just feel like just because she had this strong urge and she wanted to get the education, although the family couldn't support, but you know how universe works in strange ways, and look, you had to be in non-profit and then she had to connect with you and it all automatically worked out. So good luck to her, and I'm sure she's doing amazingly well. Moving on, you've served on multiple boards, including Ascend, APACS, and Open Global. What separates effective board leadership from ceremonial governance? What do you think?
I think it's very important. A lot of these boards are managed or run by most of the volunteers, right? Now,
Okay.
these are the volunteers, which means, nonprofit boards, most of them you don't get paid. Uh, and when you don't get paid, it means you're giving your time. So in nonprofit world, we call it give, get, or assist.
Okay.
Give your time, your money, your resources. If you cannot do that, get it from somebody else and be the conduit to have the resources available for the organization. If you cannot both of them, then assist. Assist
Okay.
means, get us to that information or assist us in, by doing many things. So nonprofit, once people join a nonprofit board, they realize that is a lot of work, and it's the same quality of work that you'll be working for an organization or for your company, but it gives you return in different ways. Sometimes it's your bottom line and you financially, and the same quality of work that you give in a nonprofit, you don't get anything in return other than satisfaction or personal gratification. So at times, there is a mismatch, and some board members or people who are in this organization, they don't manage their expectations well, and then they find a challenging. So if you're working on a nonprofit board, the governance becomes very important. You have to constantly remind people that why are you serving in this board? What is the purpose? And they have to be fully in tune with the vision and mission of the cause, right? So all the boards that I've joined, most of them have something to do with education, right? Now, is education the only great cause? No. Healthcare. There are so many different causes, but I
Yeah.
found the most passion about education. So one has to really see that, just don't serve a nonprofit or don't get involved in a nonprofit because it looks nice on your resume or your CV or your background. Identify what is your biggest passion. For me, I have clearly identified my passion is education. So every time, and there are more boards that I said no to compared to what I said yes to. And every board that I've said yes, even within that board, I served and I did something about the education. That was my whole purpose of joining nonprofit. It is very challenging to have some very senior people sitting on the board and ask them to do volunteer work. So at one board that I was serving, we had president of Coca-Cola, I'm sorry, chief operating officer of Coca-Cola, CFO of Walmart, senior executive from AT&T, senior executive, all these blue chip companies, Fortune companies. And what we were asking them to do, well, you're going to read application from these students. Um, and these are the people, if you look at their calendar, it's booked for months in
Yeah.
advance. Yet they gave that time to read application from the student. And the reason they did, because they agreed to be a part of this and they wanted to give back. And nothing excites you more when you look at your next generation. So the managing part and the governance part is very important in nonprofit, and having the right executive to lead the organization, who can really manage that relationship, because you have a lot of people who are very successful in their own way and they're giving their volunteer time. So how do you leverage them, and how do you make sure that you fully take advantage of their time to benefit someone?
So I'm kind of glad that we picked up this. I mean, in the questions, brought this topic of nonprofit, but the fact that you mentioned that you figured out that education was your passion area, how did you realize that in terms of all the causes, you felt so strongly about education?
um, I think you have to see what motivates you the most, right? I've been very fortunate that I've been teaching now. This is my 20th year. And I have done different kinds of work. I ran a company. I've worked for major companies. I have traveled the world on these companies. I am most excited at the beginning of each semester because I am going to meet new students who are fresh minds, and I'll learn from them and I'll share what I have learned. So nothing excites me more than being in front of the students, right? So
Yeah.
it was an easy calling, and that makes me happy. Nothing makes me happier when one of my students former student reaches out to me and say, "Hey, I'm doing well." Somehow, as a teacher, you always see your fingerprints on that, and
Yeah,
you feel that you may have something to do with this. So after your parents, if someone is going to be happy on your progress, it's probably going to be your teacher.
100%. Okay, thank you for answering that question. Moving on, as president of Open Global, you work closely with global Pakistani entrepreneurs and professionals. What role does identity play in leadership, especially for leaders navigating global and diaspora contexts?
So I live in a very diverse city and diverse country, USA, which is one of the most diverse countries in the world. And our values and our diversity, right? So this is a land of opportunity. This is a land of immigrant that has attracted people. I've spent all my adult life in New York. And what I've seen is that this country used to be a salad bowl where everybody came and mixed into one culture. And over a few years, last, I should say a few decades, it has evolved into a melting pot, a salad bowl, right? That is now everyone is coming into the culture, but they are not blending into that culture. They're keeping their own identity. So from a
Correct.
melting pot to a salad bowl. And this gave an opportunity for people to come from different backgrounds. So there are Irish Americans who grandparents came from Ireland. They may have never visited Ireland, but they're proud of being Irish American. There are Indian Americans who have done very well, and they're proud of their India identity. There are Pakistani American. There are, English Americans. So all these. So Open is an organization of Pakistani entrepreneurs and professionals that has started about more than 25 years ago. And the purpose of this organization was to start an entrepreneurial network where they can help each other. Now, 27 years later, they have 17 chapters globally. They have a chapter in
Wow.
Canada, they have 11 chapter in US, they have chapter in England, recently opened a chapter in Berlin, and they have chapter in Pakistan. And the purpose of this organization is to provide guidance and mentorship to incoming entrepreneurs and professionals. So we have some people who have done phenomenally well in their life, in their careers, and now is their turn to give back. So whenever, someone becomes successful, there is someone who has helped that person. So as an organization, we see that there is a lot of opportunity. There is another organization called TIE, the Entrepreneur, which is started by South Asian Americans, Indian and Pakistani Americans. The organization has done phenomenally well. So if you look at all the next generation leaders, and the purpose is that we want to make sure that in the future, when there is a need for a CEO of Google, IBM, a Nobel laureate, a dean at Stanford, or any position, someone from that community has a seat on the table.
Oh, lovely.
So that's the purpose of the organization, and that's what we're trying to do.
Perfect. Alrighty. You've been teaching at NYU since 2006. As you rightly mentioned, this is going to be the 20th year, which is wow. And lead the Executive Masters in Marketing and Strategic Communications. In your opinion, what do today's students understand about leadership that previous generations didn't? And what are they still unprepared for? I think I have a little bit answer of the second part, but let's go.
Yeah, I think every generation is smarter than their previous generation. And the reason is because they have access to a lot more information. So obviously you have lot more access than I did. When I was in college, if I wanted to find out how to get from point A, point B, I would have to either, get a book from a library or buy a map. But today, these things can be done in nanoseconds. So access to information is very important. Now, if you look at the next generation of leaders, they're young, they're bold, and they're big risk takers. They have a lot of things, which give them a competitive advantage over the previous. One thing that they don't have, which only will come with time, is the experience.
Experience.
And one thing also that I see that can really be beneficial to incoming, next generation leaders is the soft skills. And what do I mean by soft skills? Because, many of them are, so people who are entering the workforce now in 2026, for them, concept of an office for many of them is a screen, because they have never actually worked out of an office where you go and go to a different place and work. And it is very hard for them to understand, why would I spend an hour or 40 minutes going to another place when I can do that sitting down in my home and I could be
Yeah.
very effective. But the world is blended. It has worked in the old model also, and most of the world still goes outside to work. Um, so don't use your own lens and pretend that the whole world would work that way. So a lot of time when I see them, they need some improvement in seeing someone eye to eye, shaking hand with the person, reading their emotions. So those soft skills are very critical and important. Now, how do you learn that, and where do you go to? No college or university teaches you that. You learn that by interacting with people in person, not
Yeah.
on a screen. Right now, we both are on a screen. It's very convenient. It's very effective. But what's happening, below whatever you're seeing in the screen, you don't know, right? And it
Yeah.
becomes very difficult to read emotions. You will only show me what you want to show me, and if you don't want to show me, you have a click where your camera can be off. But when I'm sitting in front of you, I cannot cover my face. You can see it, you can read it. So let's say if you talk to me something and I don't like it and I want to express differently, I can mute myself, I can turn the camera off, and I can really feel whatever I want to feel. And 10 seconds later, I can come back with a happy face. I cannot do that in a face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
A lot of our young generation is missing that. Now, one more important thing that's going to happen, which I'm, in my next book I'm working on, is leading the next generation. So I have worked with humans, I work with people, I work with people in person, I work people remotely, work people in a hybrid model. I have never managed or led humanoids. So there are only 3.5 million humanoids or robots at workplace. But in next 20, 30 years, this number would be very large.
Oh,
There may
wow.
be hundreds of millions of uh, robots. Now, how do you manage machine
Yeah.
and how do you work on their emotions, which are emotionless? So that will be an interesting thing, and that remains to be seen. So people will learn. But I think for it was a long answer to your short question. But one thing that I would want to focus for our next generation is to really pay attention to the soft skills.
Yeah, I think that is such a good point. And no matter how much people want to work from home for the ease of it, or for saving time on commute, or could be any other reason, there is nothing you can actually substitute while working together and spending time and learning from each other in person, like you rightfully said. All right, moving on. Your book is literally titled Leadership in Changing Times. What are the leadership capabilities that matter most when certainty disappears?
I think it's your resilience, your confidence in people and yourself, and I think being caring as a leader, um, having the ethical values. There are 12 different traits of leadership, from visionary. All these things are very important, but different times as for different traits of leadership. When you're going through challenging times, one has to be very caring, and COVID is a great example.
Yeah,
The profitability took a back seat, and we realized that we really have to be human because we were losing people left, right, and center.
yeah,
So in challenging times, one has to be calm as a leader. A leader has to be a great communicator during challenging times because when things go wrong, you all look up to a leader, and she or he has to communicate well because that gives you a confidence. If you're sitting in a plane and there is no communication from the pilot, then you start assuming things. And most of the time, we have wrong assumptions. But the moment pilot tells us, don't worry about it, the weather is bad, but we will land you safely, everything else changes. So especially in challenging times, leaders should be very caring and have transparent communication and give the confidence to the team that we will come through this as a unified organization or a team. And those are important factors. So that's when you see true leadership, when, good leadership during good times is nothing unusual, but good leadership during challenging times is always more commendable.
and I think one of the essential points that you mentioned was the fact that how important it is to communicate. I think sometimes leaders really miss out on the very basic and the most important thing, communication. the more the team is informed of what's happening and how they're taking the next step, it brings that kind of calm confidence and helps them to take the to breathe easy in those changing times, like you said. But why do you think this happens, that although it's a very direct quality or an expectation, why do you think leaders lack sometimes on communicating or do not pay enough attention to?
I think it's not only leadership, most of the relationships in life are ruined because of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and and I'm not just talking about verbal communication, written, oral, all communication. Now, for leaders, it's especially very important because a leader is someone that you look up to, and you have an authenticity from a leader. If a leader says that, the economy is bad, the stock market goes down, and it may not be real, right? So it's very important for leaders to have a meaningful communication. Um, and your communication builds a trust with people who work with you. You start trusting people based on their communication. If I tell you something and I don't deliver on that promise, you lose the credibility and trust in me. And leader is someone that should always be trusted because this is a person that you look up to. This is the person who really decides many things about your professional life. So leaders have to be very transparent and very crisp in their communication, not only just verbal and written communication. So most of the time when you look at or communicate with good leaders, you always see that they are very clear and it's short communication. They don't write long emails, they don't write long send because they have a good command. Now, one of the challenges that I'm seeing right now, especially in the verbal communication, are incoming next generation. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the Gen Zs, I'm talking about the Alpha and what comes after that. Their communication skills, I hope, will change because they spend more time on the screen. They do very little verbal communication, and most of the things are through emojis and text messaging or you know other modes of communication. So the rules of engagement for them are very different. Uh,
Hmm.
they sometimes don't have the confidence that you need in a job interview to look at someone face to face, eye to eye, and be able to answer those questions. Now, they're very good in, on the screen or a device that has a keyboard. They're very good at that. But having a discussion, because keep this thing in mind, the artificial intelligence, which is here to stay and not going anywhere, is going to change our lives. And when you think from the artificial intelligence, when you talk about intelligence, there were three factors of intelligence we always focused on: the IQ, the EQ, and the SQ. Intelligent quotient, that's how we judged people who's smart, who should be in, top schools, what's your IQ? And today, if you think about it, artificial intelligence is going to neutralize most of that. So
Hmm.
if you know 15 languages, which is very important and good, in few years, artificial intelligence will neutralize that completely. You don't not need to know. I can communicate with you in different language and we both can be very comfortable. If you know capitals of all countries, that would no longer be needed, right? So the essence would be how good is your emotional intelligence
Hmm.
and how good is your social intelligence? And I think that's where going to be the focus. And I always tell the incoming next generation that just don't focus on, IQ as much because artificial intelligence is going to resolve a lot of those IQ questions. But your emotional intelligence is not yet addressed by artificial intelligence. For that, you need the original intelligence, which is OI.
Perfect. I mean, thank you. This was so very well you've explained. And I'm pretty sure everyone who's going to be listening to it will bring a different perspective on how they've been viewing things and giving importance to now how they need to alter and probably get back to work, get back to seeing everyone in person and building on those social skills for good. All right, moving on. With your background in marketing and strategy, how do you think about trust as a leadership asset, especially in an era of noise and short attention spans?
Well, marketing is all about trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, why would somebody use your product or services? Because they trust your product or services, right? There are multiple products or services that we need because we just need them. But I think as a marketing leader, it is very important for them to be good, transparent communicators as well. Once someone trusts your product and services, the every other aspect of the product and service is kind of ignored. Your prices may not be good. Your product may not be good. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the most desirable product or company that we have in US is Amazon, that has the highest customer satisfaction. And you think about Amazon. So Amazon doesn't sell the best products. Most of the products we order from Amazon, we don't like them. We don't like the charger. We don't like, the case that we order. They're not the cheapest price also, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask them how is Amazon, oh, we love Amazon. Because why? The experience that they give is their trust. Amazon is very clear in communication. The moment you place an order, they communicate with you, thank you for placing an order. 24 hours later, they communicate with you that your order is being processed and you should be expecting. They also send you a link to track the order. So there is an ongoing communication. This is a part of their customer satisfaction marketing activity that they communicate so well with you and you feel connected with them. You never have to reach out to them. They reach out to you. They tell you that, hey, by the way, our uh, team just delivered your item and here is a picture. So if you look at Amazon, the reason Amazon is so successful is because they have built that marketing trust with their customers.
Perfect. Thank you. Tell us, looking ahead 10 to 15 years, what will leadership demand that today's systems are not preparing people for yet?
Oh, that's a very loaded question.
I tried.
It all depends, Ekta. I think that's a great question. But leadership is evolving so much now that I'm very careful about predicting 10, 15 years from now.
Mhm,
The the thing that I feel comfortable, adaptability would be very important. How flexible the leaders are,
mhm,
uh, how they are future forward thinkers. Because what I am applying today may not be as relevant 15, 20 years from now. But one thing for sure that I feel very confident, dealing with non-humans would be more common, both as customers and your colleagues as co-worker. So I think a company or people, an organization that is really ready for the changing world, I think will prevail in next 10, 15 years. People who will be leaders in 10, 15 years are people who are just graduating or recently graduated. So I think they should keep an eye on the market. They should see what changes are taking place in the marketplace. They should also be aware of the what's going around. And whatever your background is, whatever your age group is, put that aside and look at from the lens of people who are entering the workforce and look at the lens of the people who are going to be your customer. Because as a leader, you have to be serving people. And it doesn't matter what your preferences are. You have to think about what are the preferences of the people that I'm serving and I'm trying to provide our products and services to.
great answer. And I already made the mental notes when you said people who graduated and who are graduating pay attention. So I was like, all right, let's listen to this. Okay, moving on. Leadership often looks prestigious from the outside. What is the personal cost leaders must be willing to pay, but they rarely talk about?
Loneliness.
Yeah?
The higher you go, the lonelier it becomes, right? Because when success is not optional, right? It's required at the
Mm,
top.
yeah.
And failure is an orphan. Nobody wants to take responsibility. And good leaders always, when things go right, they look at their team through the window, and when things go wrong, they look in the mirror. But as you go up in the organization, remember when things will happen in a right way, a lot of appreciation will come
Yeah.
and people will be very kind. But when things go wrong, people will be equally brutal to you.
Yeah.
And that people includes your board, your customers, your employees. So it's a place, and that's the reason that people don't last long at CEO's position or C-suites, because it's evolving. and it's very lonely. A lot of leaders don't share this in public, but it is very attractive until you get there. Once you get there, it loses value, uh, and then people just find it very difficult to communicate that.
All right. What does leadership require from you before it gives you influence, recognition, or legacy?
I think how do you decide someone is a good leader or a bad leader, right? History decides, right? It's how you leaving the organization, how you found it, and how you left it. I can always say I'm a great leader, but it doesn't matter. Whether you're a political leader, business leader, or social leader, your work would speak uh, louder than anything else. And good leaders care less about their individual performance and more about, what they have given. An example, Jimmy Carter was a president, and he was not very popular during his presidency time. But later on, people realize what he has done as a human, what he gave back, and kind of a person he was. He was a, you know, he was appreciated very differently. So leaders always, every leader comes with a different mindset. But good leaders always ask themselves that what legacy I'm leaving. Now, your
Mhm.
legacy could be I made this company profitable. Your
Hmm.
legacy could be that, I grew this company, or your legacy could be I left this world in a better place than I found it.
Perfect. All right, we've come towards the end. So, this is the last question. And I want to know, what are you the most unapologetic about in this very stage and moment in your life?
I'm very unapologetic about everything that I am. And it took me
Okay.
a long time. When I came to this country, I wanted to adapt into everything else. I wanted to be very, what the society and people around me. But I am who I am. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of my identity. I'm proud of my ethnicity. I'm proud of my lifestyle. I'm proud of my religion, my culture, my beliefs. And I'm completely, I don't have to be, because if I believe that I'm doing something right, I should be enjoying that, and I don't have to adapt to make someone happy. Now, that doesn't mean that you make other people upset or angry, but we all come from wonderful cultures, wonderful background, wonderful ethnicities. I'm proud of where I'm living. I still believe that US is one of the best places in the world to live in. Yes, we go through challenges, but challenges are permanent, right? I'm very unapologetic about who I am, what I eat, how I live, the friends that I have, and everything around me, because now it's my choice.
Yeah.
I'm in that stage of my life that I'm not forced to do things. I do things because I want to do, and I'm very proud of everything that I do. And I am most proud of the students that I've had over the years.
Yay. Well, it's a pack. Thank you, Professor Khan, for sharing everything with all your heart, all the wonderful insights. And I'm sincerely so grateful that I got a little nugget of the time from your calendar and we were able to do this. What are your thoughts on this episode and the recording?
Well, first of all, thanks for challenging me, right? This was an open chest kind of an interview, open heart, where you talk about whatever it's in your heart. This is not a very well scripted, you ask, how's the market doing, what's happening in the
Yeah.
marketing world. I mean, it was a good combination, right? It was a good salad bowl interview. And I'm so proud that how you put this together. And I have watched some of your other interviews as well. I mean, that makes me feel really happy that, how you have transcripted this, how you really converting this into a great conversation. At the end of the day, people want to have good conversation. People want to hear stories, and you're a good storyteller.
Thank you, Professor Khan. On that note, we're going to pack it. Um, Some conversations don't end when the recording stops. They stay with you, quietly shaping how you think, choose, and lead long after the words fade. This was one of those conversations. Not because of the answers, but because of the pauses in between, because of the decades behind each reflection, because of the care with which leadership was held and not performed. If leadership is something we pass forward through classrooms, boardrooms, communities, and moments like this, then today was an act of transmission. This is Unapologetic Me, and this conversation with Professor Tariq Khan now belongs to you. I'm your host, Ekta Khurana. Stay tuned until the next episode.